Many stories were able to capture my attention from a very young age, from Smile Dog to the Russian Sleep Experiment, and then finally of course Sonic.exe. I was a sucker for creepypastas as a kid. I remember listening to people like Some Ordinary Gamers and Mullet Mike narrate their creepypasta for the week and was always enthralled by it, as the stories were just the perfect thing for young me who was just completely obsessed with horror media at the time. And these stories were all over the place, with some being incredible masterpieces of fictions that tell deep and unapologetically frightening displays of horror, while others were trope-filled messes that seemed to fall into the same cliches of hyper-realistic blood and gratuitous violence. But one story really stood out to me from very early on in my journey within the medium, and it involved a character that I loved growing up. That character, of course, being Godzilla, a character that has seen his fair share of disturbing stories, with films like Godzilla 1954, GMK, and more recent adaptations like Shin Godzilla and -1. The character is no stranger to the horror medium. However, there hasn't really been a more directly horror-involved story involving Godzilla like this one. In a twist of events, Godzilla isn't even the villain in the story, he's the hero. That story is, of course, the NES Godzilla Creepypasta, a story which blends the line between reality and fiction a lot better than a lot of the other stories on the Creepypasta wiki, as throughout the plot, through its clever usage of sprite work and world building, it leaves you wondering whether it was a hack or completely made up. But before going any further with it, first off, I'd like to thank JohnXWoodcat for being willing to read off all these excerpts from me, and secondly, remember to like and subscribe to the channel if you like this video, and comment your opinions on the story down below. I really want to hear your thoughts on it, because the feelings around the story generally are pretty mixed because of some parts of it being better than others, and so I really want to know if you think it's a good overall story, if you think it falls apart because of that. Now let's get into the actual story with... The story begins with our narrator Zach detailing his love for Godzilla films and how he grew up playing the Godzilla game for the NES, and after a year he traded the game in for another and found himself longing to play his childhood game that he described as being mediocre but lovable. After many years he gets a new NES and his friend Billy gets him a copy of Godzilla Monster of Monsters, which while playing on the first stage Earth he describes as being exactly the same as before, with the gameplay loop of destroying bases and killing monsters exactly the same as he remembers it being as a kid. Then he gets to the fight against Godzilla, where it does its typical smacking move that it does in the regular game. However, things quickly go wrong because after it starts attacking, this happens.
This caused the game to glitch up, because once he started smacking me, he never stopped. The timer's supposed to end the fight in about 40 seconds, but this lasted for nearly 5 minutes. After a while, the graphics started to mess up, with little red blocks all over the place.
After resetting the game, things seem to be back to normal, and he defeats Godzilla and Mogera, heading on to Mars, where he notices another strange thing, with Titanosaurus being on the map. See, this wouldn't be so strange, as Titanosaurus is an iconic monster within the Godzilla franchise. However, Titanosaurus was nowhere to be found in the original game. And things get even stranger within the Godzilla fight once again, as during the fight, the Godzilla sprite completely glitches out, as many versions of the eyeballs of Godzilla appear all over the glitched out screen, all a deep shade of red. And things continue to get even stranger with Mogera, as in the fight Mogera is twice its normal size, and after he defeats the mech, this happens.
This happened extremely fast, so I was lucky to get a screen cap of it at all. But what happened was that the giant Mogera sprite started to shatter and melt. I still have no idea what that meant.
And of course, the narrator keeps going through the world and defeats Titanosaurus before moving on to Pathos, and for my first interjection I like to say I love just how the story cares about building the world it is in. The setup is extremely believable and well put together, with it seeming like he could have just found some weird bootleg or ROM hack on accident of Monster of Monsters someone made just to fuck with him. Or maybe his friend Billy, the one who provided the copy, messed with the game as well to play some sort of practical joke, which the story will answer later. Then the way they are able to write the scares off at this point as just being glitches is also masterful, as it allows it to just seem weird, but nothing truly scary at this point. There's an explainable reason for why things are the way they are. And then the sprite work is of course just out of this world. They make every single sprite throughout the story seem like it couldn't be put in the game, and I personally wouldn't bat an eye. But enough of me, now let's move on to... Pathos is where the real horror of the story truly begins, as the first thing he notices about it is off as soon as he gets there. First off, there's Biollante, one of my personal favorites on the map. However, this is stranger to the fact Godzilla vs. Biollante came out in 1989 and Monsters of Monsters came out in 1988, but he throws it aside and just assumes it's a weird marketing stunt. Then the music was also different. It's way more isolating and desolate, as he describes it being like 5 different songs mashed together with the same exact instruments. He then tries to do one of the mountain levels, but finds the levels once filled to the brim with enemies are now completely desolate and a blood-red moon hangs over the mountain range. And then every single mountain level on Pathos followed this exact format, however the orange levels were different, being cave systems filled to the brim with Patango spawns. He then gets to the Mogera and Godzilla fights, but the creatures are both malformed versions of their original counterparts, with Mogera being a flying machine that still uses its drill, and Godzilla being a fast-moving alien beast that doesn't resemble anything worldly to any degree. Surprisingly, however, Biollante is a much more typical fight, with the monster staying almost completely the same as its film counterpart, never straying away from its original design. However, after defeating Biollante, shit hits the fan for the very first time when he notices this on the world map. He goes over to the level in fear of what could possibly be on there, and when starting the level he sees a hellish landscape with the one single word at the top: run. The first time he opens the level, Godzilla was killed instantly by a creature that he wasn't able to see as he reached down to grab something else, but upon retrialing the level, this happens.
That's when heard a low bellowing sound, and then I saw it. This thing. Do you know that feeling your body has when you feel like you're in extreme danger? You start to recoil and tense up as the adrenaline flows through your veins, and your nerves start to feel very cold. That's the feeling I had when I took this screen cap. I haven't seen all the Godzilla movies, but I'm pretty damn sure this was never in any of them. It had to be something the creators made up. But what kind of sick fuck would put this in a children's game?
And after he sees the creature, which most people refer to as Red, he follows the game's advice and begins running to the right, before eventually outrunning the creature, and upon defeating the stage, he realizes that Mothra still has to complete it. But instead, Mothra is allowed to beat the level without actually completing it, therefore allowing him to move on to the next planet. And once again, I just have to say, wow, the way they're able to keep this going while making it seem like something that could actually happen is incredible. Even with the creature of Red and everything being off, it could still just be explained as some creepy ROM hack and nothing more. It hasn't veered into supernatural aspects and instead keeps what we are seeing as completely realistic as possible, and I really love that about this story. Also, the design of Red is quite great, as they're able to convey a sense of dread extremely well, which is extremely impressive considering that these are still done with 8-bit sprites at this point. And the feeling upon seeing Red is one of the few that I think hasn't been matched by many other creepypastas, as from the very beginning of you seeing the creature, you realize that something is just off. And this is no longer just slightly off, we are now fully into horror territory, as we know things are only going to get worse from here. And with that being said, let's move on to... Upon entering trance, the narrator realizes this has to be some sort of hack, because while still reeling back from the horrors of Pathos, he notices the monsters that were included are generally the standard fare: Hedorah, Varen, and then Orga? This is extremely strange, as Orga is from Godzilla 2000, a film made in 1999, 11 years after Monster of Monsters came out, therefore there is no possible way that Toho could have known about this character yet. He then opens the first level, which is a question mark, where a face asks random questions and makes a face depend on your answer, asking stuff like,
Do you like the game? Does the moon rotate? Does your dog like the president?
After answering the questions, he goes into the levels, which start producing weird Entropy visuals, as well as more disturbing enemies than before, as well as not Mogera appearing randomly in one of the scrolling levels, and something impossible in the normal game. He then runs into disturbing, twisted versions of Hedorah and Varen, looking nothing like their moving counterparts, as now Hedorah is a long skeletal snake creature and Varen is a purple monster with a twisted head that can shoot rockets out of it. And then after defeating the two creatures, he faces off against Orga, who just like in the movie attempts to swallow Godzilla, but he remembers how Godzilla defeats Orga in the film and shoots a beam within it, killing it. However, after defeating Orga, he sees it. Once again, there's a level with Red, and in this level it chases him like before, except this time there's obstacles, and upon jumping over them, Red swallows them whole. And upon defeating the level, he gets excited, and then this happens.
I escaped him yet again. I felt really excited, and so I laughed and said, Not this time, asshole. I decided to take a screen cap to celebrate. But when I said that sentence, just before the level ended, the monster did something that made my blood run cold. It looked at me.
This section is what scared me the most as a kid, as I just remember the look he gave into the camera, and that sent chills down my spine, and with saying that, it's still a great scare. It still sticks in my brain the same way it did when I was a kid. But this leads into one of my first problems with the story. It's setting up a supernatural angle, which one of the things that I have liked about the story so far is it kept it mostly within the real world, as it could have all just been a ROM hack. However, by adding that supernatural element, we now know that this story is impossible and it's instead just another nightmare scenario that is completely outside the realm of possibility like all the other ones. Now, that's not to say that as a bad thing per se, but I do think this leads to many of the problems that we will get to later within this story. But without getting too far ahead of myself, let's get on to the next chapter, which is... With Dementia, the chapter starts with the narrator freaking out about the fact that Red looked at him as he struggles to figure out just exactly why the creature stared directly at him, as this was officially left the realm of possibility in his mind. He then notices 4 monsters on the board: Baragon, Gigan, Manda, and Space Godzilla, and is once again surprised as Manda and Space Godzilla were once again not in the original game. The first section is, of course, the face with questions again before a water level with Anguirus where he runs into a couple new monsters and weird level designs, and then with the Godzilla level he runs into more weird and trippy visuals. Then he has another fight with a weird trippy monster, this time being not Baragon, which while in the films, Baragon is quite small, this one is gigantic and towers over Godzilla. He normally uses a kick to attack, but when he gets cornered by Godzilla, this happens.
First, he blasts a cloudy breath of pixels down at you, which causes you to freeze. Then he walks back to the right corner of the screen and extends a huge Gatling gun from his abdomen.
After defeating Not Baragon, he goes to a level which he calls the Arctic and runs into more weird and strange creatures like a Spikewalker, Iceman, which looks oddly similar to Not Gazora, and a walrus called Maguma from the obscure kaiju film Gorath. Then he goes to fight Gigan, which from the beginning looks like it's going to be an easy fight, however this happens. Using his razor-sharp claws, a laser beam, and a howl to try and defeat Anguirus, and with its fast agility it proves to be a harsh foe for Anguirus, but eventually he's able to defeat him. Then next is Space Godzilla, where nothing truly remarkable happens, just more boss fights. Then finally is another Red level where this time he has to complete it as Anguirus, where he realizes that he has to outrun Red underwater, no longer just on land, as it revealed that Red can change his form depending on what environment he is in. And after completing, he is able to move on to the next planet. However, to interject, while I still like this story so far, I think this chapter does drag a bit. It does the same thing as previous chapters, and while the new creative and intriguing monster designs really carry this chapter, I think it is overall one of the weaker ones. However, I do like how you can tell this author most definitely has a deep connection with the kaiju subgenre, as he is able to bring in obscure and strange kaijus that most people haven't even heard of at this point. But overall, the story is still going strong. I just think it suffers from middle of the story syndrome. But next we move on to... This is where I started to get worried when I saw this section, as the last chapter had been somewhat of a lull to me, but hopefully this section will prove me wrong and the story will keep going at full steam. The section once again begins with the question face asking him lots of weird and unusual questions before finally asking,
Do you like Mothra?
Upon answering with no, the face gets maniacal and replies with,
Too bad.
Godzilla is then removed from the map, leaving the narrator with only Mothra, the weakest of all the playable kaiju, and the first level is a strange forest with even stranger creatures, however they are mostly harmless. Things get weird when suddenly a pixel art animation of a kid with a bear head licking an ice cream cone is shown, wearing the same clothes that the narrator used to wear as a kid, and then after touching an hourglass it takes into a dimension filled with clocks and 3-hour glasses. One fills the world with enemies from the past, one with original game enemies, and one with creatures from the future, and upon defeating the creatures from the future, he's taken to a world of smokestacks and pollution. Out of the pollution pops out a oil slick creature, and upon defeating it, the next level is an iceland filled with raptors that kill each other fighting over territory. However, the next level is where things get really strange, because the moon appears from the earlier levels, but it lowers, cracking open and revealing a humanoid within, which falls into the water below, and upon dropping into the water, the ground suddenly begins to shake. Out of the water, a giant creature shoots out, which they called the Moon Beast, a massive creature with a floating head, and upon defeat, this happens.
I've been trying to keep my promise and suppress this memory for years, but it seems as if I have to get it off my chest. This is a very painful memory for me. But the game already knows about it, and I think you should too. I'll just tell you the important parts, because I don't like bringing this experience back into my head unless I have to. Back when I was in middle school, I had a girlfriend named Melissa. She suffered from some kind of mental disorder that caused her to go into episodes. When she was in an episode, she would stand or sit perfectly straight and still, and her face would instantly lose any expressions she had before. She would speak very clearly without any hint of emotion. When it was over, she would start trembling, and sometimes bury her face in her hands, and remain silent for several minutes. I can't really convey the feeling it gave me in words, and I won't try. You had to see this in person to understand. But despite this, she was a very kind person and I cared about her dearly. We liked to hang out in a field at night and look at the stars. But one night, she didn't say anything to me at all. She just stared directly at the moon, trembling. I tried to talk to her, but she suddenly sprung up and ran right into traffic. I tried to stop her, but I was too late. She got hit by a truck and was killed that night. I looked her right in the eyes when the wheels went over her neck. That sight has always haunted me. I know that the game knows about this because after I defeated the Moon Beast, this happened.
And with that is the ending of part 1 of Entropy, and so far I actually forgot just how much I like the twist of the game, knowing the past of the creator and revealing there's a lot more going on within the surface of the story, and that Zack might actually be truthfully an unreliable narrator. We don't know if he's truly telling us everything, and I think that makes the story much more interesting. And I'm also really liking how the story is avoiding cliches, not doing the whole you gotta believe the story with no hyper-realistic blur eyes. This section really dragged me back into the story as it's building on more reasons to actually care about Zack. Overall, a much better segment than the last one, and once again I'm ingrained into what could possibly be next. After that shock, we go back to a weird animation of a fish man seemingly struggling for air, and next is a weird golden maze that Mothra has to go through with more strange monsters and trippy visuals before suddenly escaping. After that is a strange cliffside level where we see more creatures exploring the environment as we see what looks like an ecosystem with birds picking off other monsters. Finally, there's the Batra and Megalon fight, which are fairly normal besides them not being meant to be in the game originally, but nothing too out of the ordinary. Things quickly take a turn for the horrifying, however, when afterwards another animation is shown of someone getting an axe in their face, and then a dark maze where creepy noises that seem to be following him were heard, and upon photo editing reveals this. Then there is a fight with Mechagodzilla, which seems to be going normal before it suddenly reforms into a disturbing beast of a creature with a humanoid head. After defeating it, they are of course taken back to a red maze, where of course Red appears, but this time something interesting happens, being this.
However, I did take a screenshot of the red monster doing something I found very interesting. I had managed to lose it by going through a different path than it originally expected, and it was blocked from attacking me by one of the organic walls of the red labyrinth, or so I thought.
After that, Entropy is now over, and I gotta say, this chapter as a whole was most likely my favorite of them all. It gave me a reason to care about Zack and showed that there was more depth to him than meets the eye. It also has a lot of great scares, the one in the maze being a personal favorite of mine, and does an excellent job building the world around it, and I think the name of the planet really fits with the section, as entropy is a scientific concept that is mostly associated with a state of disorder, randomness, or uncertainty, as I think the world he finds himself in is random and full of uncertainty. Now let's get on with the next section, being Exodus is more of the same, beginning with Godzilla going to the question face once again, getting asked a couple of questions before asking,
"Would you like a new monster?"
Upon answering yes, they get a new bat monster named Solomon, who is essentially invincible to all the damage that the enemies try to do to him, and after completing another weird entropy level, this screen pops up. The next level features Godzilla going through a map filled with monsters and pyramids in the background before getting to the end of the map, which has a huge pyramid on it. The huge pyramid then lights up, which causes two monsters to appear, which Godzilla has to quickly defeat. The next two levels are more strange environments that Godzilla and Solomon must go through, with nothing new much being added here. Upon defeating those levels, he seems to have to go through a boss gauntlet of a lot of the same bosses he had to fight before, like Not Gazora and Not Hedorah, as well as some new ones like Kumanga and Gorosaurus. However, things quickly turn a wrong way when he has to face Not Ghidorah, which while originally just being a door rat, turns into a creature called Chimera, an amalgamation of all the weird creatures from before, and with each health bar removed, a piece of it falls off, until finally only the head remains. The final level is a cemetery, and when getting there, Solomon isn't allowed in, and a blue figure appears over Godzilla. The character is shown as an angel, but suddenly the landscape begins to change, becoming a more hell-like place, leading to Red once again appearing before promptly devouring the angel that we just met. And that is Exodus, and once again this chapter was definitely a weak point to me because while there was a lot of things to like, the new things that were added were more of the same. Just a weird environment with creepy things, but not actually adding to the plot of the story, if that makes sense. I also think the reaction the narrator has to the angel is a bit melodramatic and corny, but you do you. Overall, I think this is one of the weakest chapters by a long shot, and most likely the weakest one so far. But next, the final planet is... Zenith starts the same way as all the others, with him going to the face question guy like normal. Oh. They killed him. They killed the face guy. After that, he tries to reach for a new monster when the game literally tells him no, moving it out of his playable reach and then showing an image of a pixelated burnt body. And then Mothra and Godzilla get sent through some hellish sights, full of some of the scariest and creepy creatures we have seen so far, with parts of it quite looking like biblical depiction levels of hell. Shit begins to hit the fan as a bunch of creatures blend together, creating this monster bigger than any of the ones before it, attacking Mothra. And the next stage has Anguirus exploring a lake littered with bodies and a corpse hanging, which has a creature split out of it attacking Anguirus. Then for Godzilla's level, he has to deal with a fleshy pit full of tapeworm type creatures that slither and wriggle around the fleshy and deformed landscapes around it.
I think it was about 4 minutes before the end that this level was making me physically sick. The tension was getting to me, and having to take in all these disgusting sights made me want to puke. I nearly did pause the game and look for a bag, but I was able to hold it together.
Next, Solomon has to deal with another hellscape full of monsters, but besides that, the rest of the Zenith seems to be normal. All the boss fights seem to be unchanged, even this last one. Oh. Fight with Red goes about as expected from the story so far. Red unslots the team, eating Mothra and Anguirus near death. Fireballs with faces on them, you know that you're completely fucked when it comes to defeating Red. And it doesn't help that when trying to face it, he is now trapped physically by Red on the couch, and after Solomon seems to defeat Red, Red transforms into an even bigger beast with much more life than before. Red seems to be nearly unstoppable, completely onslaughting every single one of the monsters at every possible turn, even swallowing Godzilla completely whole. But after a game over screen flashes, it glitches out as the angel from before appears, revealing it to be his dead girlfriend Melissa, and then unlocks this new monster in order to defeat Red. This new monster completely sweeps the floor with Red, and upon defeating Red, he set her and all the monsters free, and ends with...
Tears of joy streamed down my face, and I broke out crying. I cried harder than I have in several years, maybe in whole life. All I had been through, all I had discovered, and now the game was coming to an end. But before she and the others left, Melissa had something to tell me. You have saved us. We are forever grateful. We'll be together again. Someday.
Then after a long discussion with himself, he decides to sell the cartridge on eBay instead of actually destroying it. So happily ever after, you might be saying. He won and defeated Red, but see, those final 2 chapters I think caused the entire story to fall completely apart for me. While I thought the hellish landscapes were unique and a lot of the monsters were horrific abominations that really showcased just how good of a monster designer the creator was, I think the goofy ending almost ruined it for me. The switch up from Red completely annihilating the monsters, but then this one singular one being able to sweep the floor with them doesn't seem earned, and the dialogue gets so melodramatic by the end of it that it becomes basically laughable by the end. And it sucks because the rest of the story is insanely unique, creative, and well written, but man does the ending just fall apart, and the whole not being able to move thing didn't feel needed. Yes, it showed that he was actually in danger from Red, but you didn't need to do that not being able to move part. You could have just revealed him killing Melissa, and that would have been sufficient enough to reveal that Red was in fact a real life threat. And the epilogue with him selling the cartridge was completely unneeded, as without the epilogue it would just ended with the monsters being set free, which is a much better conclusion than just selling it on eBay. But I won't let that rather goofy ending ruin it for me. I still love this story, no matter how goofy and over the top the ending is. The world building on display here is levels above everything else around the time, and blows many other creepypastas just completely out of the water. The sprite work is nothing short of impeccable, and this shows primarily what I meant last week about imagery and the story needing to work together in order to actually work, as every single image in this pushes the story forward in an interesting way. And while I glazed over a lot of the story, if you want to actually read it and check it out, this story, I would highly recommend it, as it's highly worth a read and earned its spot as one of the top creepypastas for a reason. And the way Red is able to convey fear from the very beginning is something that most other creepypastas aren't even able to dream of, as from the very moment you see him, you know that the guy means business. He is going to stop at nothing to kill Godzilla. And things get even more terrifying with Red as we know that he can see Zack and that he is not safe behind the screen, added an even more terrifying layer to it than before. And speaking of layers, there's so many hidden meanings behind even the naming of the planets. First off, Pathos means experience, misfortune, emotion, and condition, and this relates back to the story as we experience firsthand the emotions he is feeling upon seeing the monster for the first time and the misfortune he is going to be experiencing at the hands of Red. Next up is trance. The story lulls us into a trance as we expect not any supernatural things to happen, but then Red looks at him. For Dementia, we see a monster forgotten by time. Maguma, just like many of the people that suffer from dementia, forget things with time. I already explained the meaning behind Entropy, but Exodus sounds a lot like Exodus, which is the book of the Bible where the Egyptians built the pyramids just like we see in the background of the planet. Then finally, Zenith means high point. This is the high point of the story as it's the ending. Because of that name, it is fitting for what we are seeing here. So I could completely be pulling on my ass here, but I think there's some meaning behind the names here. I also really liked how before, the glitch seems to almost be sentient, changing and transforming these monsters that we once knew as just that kaijus into horrific amalgamations of what they once were. And it's strange because a lot of the monsters seem to take the appearance similar to other monsters we see later in the story, with Gazora becoming similar to the Iceman and Mogera taking appearance similar to the future monster in the clock section. I also like how the monsters seem to represent something. With Godzilla, he represents comfort because when he shows up we know he's in a much better space. However, Mothra represents the complete opposite, representing fear and fragility. And this is made even more apparent in Entropy when Godzilla gets taken away from Zack, leaving him completely alone with Mothra, which is a much more scary situation to be in. Because of that, the story is able to build a layer of fear on its own level within Creepypastas, and that is why I think it stands out on its own level compared to all the others. And although I don't think it's a perfect creepypasta, it almost is. And this has been AB Short Films, and I'll see you all next week. Thank God it's over. I'm glad that is it for Godzilla NES Creepypasta, and there's no C. Oh God. Oh fuck.